Sleep is the hidden medicine your body cannot live without. Welcome back to another episode of The Missing Link in Your Healing. Loretta and I are here to bring you a slightly different angle, or maybe a very different angle, on a topic you probably think you know everything about, or if not everything, a lot. So we're going to take you through our own personal experiences of why we're talking about sleep and how we got to the point of doing an episode on something that many people are talking about. So hang in. And why are we talking about this? So let's go straight into that. Well, Loretta and I have had experiences of not sleeping, Loretta more recently than me, but both of us used to be very, very good sleepers. And I went through a period of a number of years, actually, and sometimes I still do, where I was sleeping exceptionally badly or with very disruptive sleep. And it's not until you don't sleep and you wake up feeling a certain way, it's not until that you realize how absolutely critical a really good, uninterrupted, deep night's sleep is. So, yeah, Loretta's recently not sleeping. She'll probably share with you because she's in menopause now. And Loretta always slept like a baby. I was always so envious. It's like Loretta just sleeps and I'm struggling with sleep. So as we weave our episode together, we'll both share snippets, particularly me, because I had some very chronic sleep issues and I realized how badly it was affecting me mentally, physically, and spiritually, because how we sleep is going to determine how we are in awakeness the next day in every way. Our central nervous system, our mind state, anxiety or the lack of it, how well our brain functions, and it can make us physically extremely unwell, lack of sleep. So Loretta mentioned on one episode we recorded ages ago that sleep is the most critical factor, actually, as a starting point. So your health might depend on your sleep more than you think. So Loretta, I'm going to hand over to you, and yeah, can you talk us through why you said that?
Well, I'm trying to remember why I would have said it then, but if I can't remember why I said it then, I'll just come up with something now. Sleep is when your restoration happens. And so the daytime is when our sympathetic nervous system is most active, and our sympathetic nervous system governs our alertness. It allows us to be on time. It allows us to travel through traffic. It allows us to meet deadlines. I mean, it's active. It's like the accelerator of the car. And the parasympathetic nervous system is like the brake of the car. Now, during the day, you use the brakes as well. But imagine at night, you want to park the car, turn the engine off, sympathetic, symbolically. You want to turn the engine off and you want to engage the handbrake so that the car doesn't go anywhere. Imagine you're parking on a hill, right? So our parasympathetic nervous system is most active at night. And just because we consider sleep to be a passive activity, well, it's not, because there's lots of activity that happens while we sleep, but that activity is all geared towards restoring. So tissue healing takes place while we sleep. Our immune system gets strengthened while we sleep. Our hormones that govern things like growth and metabolism and stress, they get regulated when we sleep. Our brain detoxifies at night. Our liver detoxifies most profoundly and preferentially at night. Our kidneys detoxify most at night. So that detoxification process happens in our physical body, but more importantly, in our brain at night. And so the better the detoxification happens, the more effectively we can consolidate our memories, because that's the other thing that happens at night. It's one of the things that dreaming actually does. It helps us to consolidate our memories. It helps us to get clear about what it is that we remember. What did we do yesterday? What did we do the day before? And what did we do 20 years ago? And it contextualizes those memories for us. And it supports our learning, creativity, and emotional resilience. Now, if you're not sleeping, the opposite of all of that happens, which means that tomorrow you're going to be less likely to navigate your way through your day. And we've all experienced that. I don't know, we have to pull an all-nighter for an exam. You get to the exam the next morning, you get to write that exam for those 3 hours. And after that, You feel like your whole brain is numb. Like everything is numb. You're exhausted, right? And you're emotionally less resilient. So if there's a crisis that happens on top of less sleep, or just normal life stress that happens on top of less sleep, you're going to be less resilient. And that's going to affect things like your relationships. It's going to affect things like your job. It's going to affect your general sense of well-being. And so, and also, if we don't sleep well, I mean, we're not going to talk about the cycles of sleep and the REM and the non-REM, but if we don't sleep well, then we can't dream. And our dreaming helps us to process and integrate information. So, and this happens during REM sleep mostly, and it sorts out our memories again. It consolidates learning. It helps us to regulate our emotions. So if we're not going into and out of the sleep cycles, we're not sleeping deeply, we're not actually having restorative sleep, in the long term, it is going to affect our physical body extremely. I mean, there's no way that it cannot do that. The problem, I think, is that if you become a bad sleeper, you start saying things like to yourself, well, I'm a bad sleeper. I just don't sleep well. And then the bad sleeping and the not sleeping becomes habitual. And what ends up happening is, because your body's so amazingly adaptive, you can function with poor sleep. The problem is, that level of function that you consider to be normal is probably not even 20% of the kind of function that you're capable of. And I'm not talking about getting things done. I'm just talking about being able to chill in the day, being able to relax, being able to take breaks, not being on your nerves all day, how you communicate with yourself, the self-talk you have, how you communicate with other people, all of those things. You start habituating yourself to, this is my new normal. Well, actually, no. And as Antoinette says, if you've been a good sleeper, and I've been an amazing sleeper my whole life, when your sleep wheels start falling off, you suddenly realize how great you feel when you sleep, and relatively how awful you feel when you don't sleep. The other thing is that when you're not sleeping, so now this is something that for those of you who struggle with sleep and who might be insomniacs, when you hear how important it is to sleep and now you're not sleeping, now you become anxious about not sleeping, because now you start thinking, oh my goodness, now I'm not sleeping. Now what's going to happen? And I had that very thing, right? So when menopause hit, suddenly sleep wasn't as good as what it could be. And that is because your brain responds to hormone signaling, which also actually affects how you sleep. And so even though in theory we don't think of estrogen and progesterone as sleep regulating hormones, they do affect how we sleep and how well we sleep. So now I'm not sleeping and I'm awake for 3 hours, an hour and a half maybe. At its worst, it was maybe an hour and a half in the middle of the night. And then I lie there going, oh, but I've got this, and this. Now I'm starting to go through my checklist of things that have to happen tomorrow on the back of not sleeping well. Because when I was a great sleeper, and I mean, even when I was young, I could never really burn the candle at both ends. I knew how important it was for me to sleep and how cranky I got when I didn't sleep. So now suddenly I'm not sleeping well, and now my mind potentially runs away with me because of the consequences of the not sleeping. So can you see, it becomes this vicious cycle. And so my advice to you is, if you were a good sleeper and your sleep wheels fall off, the sooner you actually take the steps to get the sleep wheels back on, the better it's going to be, because you run the risk of being caught in this vicious anxiety loop around not sleeping. Now, not sleeping freaks you out. So now you're more freaked out. Well, you're going to sleep less the more freaked out you are. Okay, and so hopefully some of the things that we're going to talk about today, and it's not a super tools oriented kind of discussion, but we are going to talk about what we do in the middle of the night when we can't sleep, and some of those are really easy hacks that you can apply, and that can actually just help you. And even if you don't sleep, the way you respond to the not sleeping and what you do when you're not sleeping is almost as important as the sleeping. Okay, so sleeping wins the first prize, but if you can't attain the first prize, then you want to go for the second prize, because it can make a huge difference in your life. So in the day, we are expending energy, and at night, our body, we are harmonizing that energy. If we're looking at it now from a more energetic point of view, those of you who've listened to our episodes, you know that's really that's where I love to go, because I think that that's one of the areas that gets most neglected. So we know what the physical things are that we need to do, and but we don't necessarily do the energetic ones because we don't know about them. So hopefully these are some missing links for you. So I just want to say that in as much as, and Jeanette said this in the beginning, you know, during the day we are doing, and during the night, we're still doing, but in a more being kind of way. And what we've done in the day is going to impact what we do at night, and how, you know, how we be at night, shall I say. That English is horrendous. So one of the things that I've certainly found is that now that I have got this menopausal sleep disturbance, exercising in the day has become more of an imperative for me than it used to be. So I've always been an exerciser, but whether I exercised or not didn't seem to affect whether I slept or not. Exercising, the more active I am and the more actively I'm moving my body in the day, affects how well I sleep at night. So we all know that moving is really important. In terms of sleep, moving is one of the activities that drains wakefulness. Now, I forget the name of the book. I will look it up and we'll put it in the show notes. But I read a really interesting book about sleep. And I'm going to probably mess this up. But the concept that I got out of that is that it's like when you wake up in the morning, you've got like an abundance of no sleep, because you need to be busy, right? And during the day, your daily activities drains the no sleep tank, right? It basically empties it so that you can be exhausted enough so that you can actually go to sleep. So there are various things that we do in the day that help to drain that, I don't know, no sleep tank so that we can actually sleep at night. So what you do during the day is really important. And so for me, and this might not be true for everyone else, but the exercise has become an imperative. So if I don't exercise, I notice, oh, you know, didn't exercise today, didn't sleep as well tonight. Was still the same degree of, I thought, tired, but didn't sleep as well. So a couple of physical things that we don't always think about, and that if we look at the sort of energetics and we look at traditional Chinese medicine, is really interesting. So what we eat and how we eat and when we eat during the day has a direct effect on how we sleep at night. So from a traditional Chinese medicine point of view, there are three organ function energies that are really important. The first is that of the heart, which we don't really think about that often. But if you listened to our heart episode, I told you that in Chinese medicine, the heart is where we keep the shen, which is the spirit, essentially, all right? And so when when we're not connected to our spiritual heart, then it actually can create disruption in that shen energy, and that can create sleep disturbances. The spleen and stomach organ function energy is also affected. Now, those are most active in the day. But if we eat too late at night, or we eat a heavy meal at night, too heavy, too rich, too heavy and too much and too late, then what happens is it disturbs the stomach and spleen organ function energy. And the reason why it affects our sleep is because that then disturbs the liver organ function energy. And the liver organ function energy is most active between, in the Chinese system, 1 and 3 a.m., and in the Jinshin Jitsu system between 12 and 2 a.m., 2 and 4 a.m. So, you know, those early hours of the morning, which is generally when our sleep is most disturbed, because that's when the liver is doing the bulk of its detoxification. That's when the liver is detoxifying mentally and our emotions and our beliefs and our food and the toxins that we've taken in. And so when we place a huge amount of stress on the stomach and spleen, digestion, by eating too late and too heavily or too rich at night, it compromises the liver function. And now we don't detoxify as effectively. And that disturbs our nervous system, and that can actually impact negatively on our sleep. The liver ensures the smooth flow of energy, chi, and emotions. So when the liver is now actually hampered, well, then that becomes problematic as well. So that it's important that what we do, that we just take note of what we do in the day is going to determine what we have at night. The heart organ function energy, which is associated with the spirit, is, you know, how aligned have you been with your spirit today? So that doesn't mean have you prayed all day or have you meditated for 27 hours. It means what you've done today. Is that in alignment with what you'd love? Have you done something that you love today? Or have you been going through the checklists? Are you stuck in the job that you hate, but you feel like you've got golden manacles keeping you attached to the job because it's paying the bills and you don't believe that you can do what you really love? Now, I mean, that's quite a big concept that I just threw out there. But, if you're doing that day by day, if you're stuck in a relationship that is not in alignment with who you are, if you are constantly putting the needs of everyone else above your own, can you see that you are now no longer living in alignment with what your spirit would love? And so the less you do that, the more disturbed that heart function energy becomes. Technically, it has an effect on your sleep. Now you might go, well, I don't have the time to go and work all of that out, or I can't change my relationship, or I can't change my job. No one's asking you to do that. It's about becoming aware that this is a problem in your life. Because remember, any symptom that you have in your body is feedback of an imbalance somewhere, a lack of alignment, not something you're doing wrong, not something you've messed up on. It's just like a GPS coordinate. It's saying to you, if I'm not sleeping, it's saying, Loretta, there's a problem that needs some sort of address. Something in your life needs to be addressed. So mine was like, well, okay, I didn't actually think sleep was ever going to be an issue for me in menopause. So where am I not necessarily energetically aligned? Where am I not taking care of myself? One of the things I've noticed is if I eat too much sugar, I don't sleep. It affects my sleep. So I was at a conference this weekend and it was hotel food and I ate more of it than what was probably good for me because I ate because I was bored, and at times I ate because I was frustrated, and at times I actually just ate because I was just socially so overwhelmed and I didn't have to cook it, right? And it was always there. So it's just like it appeared at tea time. And so I ended up eating more carbohydrate and more fat and more sugar than I normally do, and I didn't sleep that well. So I know that that's what it is. So it's not like I don't have to put on a hair shirt and punish myself because I had more sugar than usual. Just like, okay, I noticed that if I eat a lot of sugar, it makes me sleep less well. So if I am going to eat all the sugar, then or at least then if I'm awake in the middle of the night, I'm like, oh, it's because I ate all that sugar. Not, because my life's falling apart. Can you see? I can turn that anxiety loop off if I know where it's coming from. All right. So, and sugar, just interestingly enough, sugar also affects your stomach and spleen organ function energy. And how interesting is this? Your stomach and spleen organ function energy is burdened by sitting. So when you're in a lecture or you're in a conference or you're sitting all day, right? And you're mentally active all day because the stomach is the mind, right? And you get frustrated or anxious because some of the lectures are so boring, you'd rather stab yourself in the eye than have to sit through them. Can you see how all of that then leads to craving the sugar more, wanting the comfort in the food more, and then you eat more of it? And okay, so nothing happens in isolation. So we're speaking about sleep, and I am rambling on a little bit now, but I just want to illustrate that nothing functions in a vacuum. It's not in isolation. You're not sleeping well in isolation. You're not sleeping well, and it's affected by everything that happens to you during the course of the day also. Now, I just want to mention that we've spoken about this before. In Chinese medicine and in Jinshin Jitsu, there's something called the body clock. And there's 2 hours during the day or night during which each organ is most active. So the kidney, which actually also regulates our sleep, the kidney organ function energy, it's most active between 6 and 8 in the evening. So that's when we're actually already starting to detoxify. And the emotion of the kidney is fear. Our survival fears, which is also why we become more anxious about our lives at night. Okay. Now, this is often the time when people eat dinner, and dinner is often the main meal of the day. So and this is the time, as Antoinette's showing, when people have a couple of drinks because, it's been the end of a long day or whatever the case may be. So again, it's no problem if you have dinner at 6, and there's no problem, I don't have a problem if you have a couple of drinks, but just know that when we start doing those kind of things later into the evening, it starts compromising the kidney function. Now, in Jinshin Jitsu, there are 2 special organ functions, the diaphragm and the umbilicus, and they're associated. Think of it energetically with the level of our spirit. They have a more sort of a spiritual kind of connotation. And those are the 2 organs that kick in from 10 till 12. And so in Jinshin Jitsu, it's really important that our kidney organ function energy is strong In other words, when I say have a handle on our fears, we're at least facing them, recognizing them, seeing them for what they are. Because remember, your ego is always communicating to you through your thoughts and your feelings, and it's driven by fear, right? It's not good or bad, it just is. So the more we are in touch with the truth of that, the healthier our kidney organ function is. And then at 8 o'clock in the evening, we energetically dip into our connection to our source. And so this is, I'm always going to say, the spiritual time at night. So now when we are watching, I don't know, a documentary about serial killing or war, so when we're doing things that ramp up our fear and decrease our connection, it's going to be more difficult for us energetically to connect to those functions that help us sleep optimally. This is another reason why going to bed by 10 p.m. at night is recommended. And while I'm speaking about going to bed at a regular time every night, it ties us into those circadian rhythms, the rhythm of day-night. And so if your day-night rhythm is all over the shop, it also becomes very difficult to sleep. So between 8 and 10, 8 and 12, if you don't go to bed at 10, but between 8 and 10 is a really good time of the day to, for example, reflect on where you were in alignment today. This is a good time to look at what did work today and not focus on what didn't work today and what you're worried about tomorrow. This would be a good time if you're worried about tomorrow to do some contemplative prayer, or pray if that's what you do. This is a good time to take that time to take those deep breaths. This is a good time to sit quietly in meditation. Whatever it is it's going to take to actually get your nervous system back into it. This is a good time of the day to be doing this. This is not a good time of the day to be having a fight. This is not a good time of the day to be meeting a deadline. This is not a good time of the day to be watching things on TV or on social media that freak you out. Not because you're trying to bypass that. You can do that stuff in the morning, but because you're trying to wind down and you're trying to connect energetically to the things that are most likely to be able to put you to sleep. So I'm going to just segue a little bit into physiology now, because you have a gland in the middle of your head called your pineal gland, and your pineal gland makes a substance called melatonin, and melatonin helps to regulate. It's part of your body clock. It helps to regulate your day-night rhythm. Incidentally, I just want to say there's a gene for the body clock. Some people genetically need more work at resetting their rhythm than others. How interesting, genetically. Yeah. There's a gene that indicates how much your body clock actually affects you. So your pineal gland makes melatonin, and melatonin is secreted when light levels drop. So I want to say that this is not just the light you can perceive through your eyes. Melatonin is actually produced in response to the light levels that are picked up by your red blood cells. So if you sleep in, we're supposed to sleep in a darkened room, right? If you sleep with an eye mask, but your room is really well lit, so now you've got the eye mask on, so you perceive it as being dark, but there's a lot of light coming in through the street lamp through your bedroom window, whatever the case may be. Your red blood cells are picking up the light levels, not only your eye. Okay, so it's important to remember that. So melatonin is produced when the sun goes down. We start making more melatonin. And when the sun comes up, we stop producing melatonin, and that's what helps us to wake up. So about 10 or 15 years ago, it was very popular for people who couldn't sleep to give them melatonin. And interestingly enough, for many people, that didn't work. Because actually giving, even though it's natural, a nature identical melatonin, it's almost like you can't actually fool the body with the substance, even if it's the same substance as you're producing in your body. And so research has now shown that actually the one time that melatonin is really worth taking is when you have jet lag. When you do intercontinental travel and you want to reset your body clock, melatonin can actually be quite useful for that. But as a general sleep aid, Doesn't really work that well. So your pineal gland regulates these circadian rhythms, and it also makes melatonin. And when we look at it energetically from in the spiritual traditions, in the Hindu tradition, this is your pineal gland is associated with your third eye, which is that it's like the vision beyond your physical vision. And it's associated with your brow chakra called the Ajna chakra. And it governs things like intuition and insight and higher states of consciousness. So when people meditate a lot, there are certain meditations that can be used to awaken this pineal gland, right? That's from a sort of a mystical point of view. And it is also considered to be the gateway to our inner vision. So instead of our eyes being our outer vision, this is like being able to look within. It's a portal to altered states of consciousness, and it's associated very often with spiritual awakening. And it's a symbol, it's symbolically known as the meeting point where the body and the mind and the spirit all align with one another. Now, in Jinshinjutsu, there are energy areas on either side of the middle of your forehead, and this is safety energy lock number 20. And 20 in Jinshinjutsu means everlasting eternity. So in Jinshinjutsu, we are taught that if these safety energy locks are not if the energies are moving effectively through these safety energy locks, it's difficult for us to connect to the vision of our spirit. It's difficult for us to actually connect to that, literally our spirit, to align with our spirit. And so when safety energy lock number 20 is open, that becomes easier. Now you might think, well, do you have to lie like this in bed all night while your arms get tired? Well, no, not really. There's actually a more effective safety energy lock to hold for that, and that is safety energy lock number 1. So here's a little hack. Sorry, I'm introducing the hack in the middle of the conversation, but safety energy lock number 1 is on the inside of the knee, and it's known as the prime mover. Really easy to reach, very easy to hold if you're lying in the fetal position, especially if you put a pillow between your knees, because then your hands don't get squished against each other. And when you hold safety energy lock number 1, it's an integrating safety energy lock. It helps to move energy down out of the head into the rest of the body. So when we're lying and we can't fall asleep because we're thinking, so many people say, I can't fall asleep because I can't switch off. Or in the middle of the night, I can't turn off my mind. Instead of turning on a screen, which is a problem for your pineal gland and your melatonin production, holding safety energy lock number 1 is a really good idea. And you can cross your hands. So place your left hand on the inside. This is my right hand. Right hand on the inside of your left knee, left hand on the inside of your right knee. It really helps to harm. And if the worst that can happen is you don't fall asleep, you're giving yourself a Jinshinjutsu treatment and you're integrating your energy and you're allowing that energy to move more effectively. So if you really do struggle to sleep, holding safety energy lock number 1 for 20 minutes during the day so that you can integrate your energy or before you go to sleep might actually help to put you to sleep and keep you asleep for longer. So the pineal gland and your melatonin production is affected by light, and particularly the frequencies associated with blue light, and all backlit devices, screens, computers and phones and TVs and tablets all emit blue light. So that's why a good part of sleep hygiene would be not to actually expose yourself to screens an hour, at least an hour, ideally 2 hours before it's time for you to go to sleep. And this is also why you don't want to turn the screen on if you wake up in the middle of the night, because as soon as you turn the screen on, you flood your pineal with this blue light, and then your melatonin levels start dropping. And that means wake up and stay awake. Okay. So things that affect the pineal gland, like meditation, I said, conscious praying, breath work, anything that calms your central nervous system down is going to have this effect on your pineal, and connecting to the vision that you have for your life. We've spoken about that in previous episodes. So the more you are aligned with what you would love, you can call that your vision, you can call that your mission or purpose if you want to. I don't know, I don't like the words mission or purpose because they imply that you've got to do so much, right? You know what? Living the most integrated life you can, or getting the most joy out of life, that could be a purpose. I mean, honestly, imagine if we all did that as our purpose, the world would be a different place. So it's not about the doing and the hustling. It's about, what is it that you love? Do you know what you love? Can you give yourself what you love? Are you capable of doing that, right? That actually helps to regulate your pineal gland. And so in Chinese medicine, the pineal gland is again related to the Shen, which is the spirit which is the heart organ function energy. And the emotion of the heart is joy. When it is harmonized, it's joy. And I'm not talking about like fake happiness. What is fake? Fake happiness can be like going shopping and buying something beautiful. I've got nothing against that, right? But it's temporary, right? And then you've got to buy something else. And I'm talking about true joy, like just joy. I don't know. People maybe call that inner peace. I actually think that part of that is, I think joy is part of that, right? In Chinese medicine, you also have an energy center up here between the eyebrows called the dantian. And you don't have to remember this. I just want to illustrate how it all connects to each other, right? And so the dantian is the seat of wisdom and spiritual vision. So the Chinese say that, the Indians, call it your Ajna chakra. The Japanese, it's everlasting eternity. It's this area in the center of the brow. And so I said to you earlier, the organ function energies that affect you, whether you sleep well or not, from a traditional Chinese medicine point of view, includes your heart energy, your kidneys, because they're the foundation for your life force. And remember, the emotion of the kidney is fear. They're about survival. So you know what? If we're only living in survival and we're not living in we're not seeing anything beyond our survival, we're not connecting to that shen in the heart. And then we get that imbalance between the kidney and the heart energy. And that can result in things like heart problems, heart failure, strokes, high blood pressure, the diseases, all right? So the diseases are all come packaged as part of this. I've told you about safety interlock number 20. So a really good exercise in Jinshinjutsu is to put your right hand on top of your head and your left hand on your forehead. Now, this gets uncomfortable if you're not lying down properly. Okay, so if you're lying down, you can have your elbows are propped on your pillows. So that's one thing that works really well for some people. I find holding safety interlock number 1 is most effective for me, which is the one on the inside of the knee. And particularly when I'm freaking out about something. When I am worried about like a survival thing, like, where am I going to get I need new clients, or how am I going to pay my bills, or is my daughter going to be okay because she's traveling very far, or what, is something going to happen to her? That, okay, when I'm having those, and those thoughts are always magnified in the night, aren't they? It's almost like your rational mind switches off in the middle of the night and your amygdala and your fear-driven emotions tend to come out. I hold safety energy lock number 1. And what I often do is I count my breaths, and I count 36 cycles of breath, only because it keeps my mind engaged. So I'm focusing on, like, is this number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4? And if I haven't fallen asleep after the first 36, then I do a few more. And sometimes I just lie there and think about something that is happy, or I think about a memory that was really amazing, or I think about someone I really, really love, or I think about something that I did, not an achievement, like a joyful experience, like a swimming in the ocean, or going to the beach, or a holiday I went to, something like that, because essentially I'm taking care of my physiology and my energy by holding safety interlock number 1. And I do have control over what my mind thinks about. And you might go, yeah, but that's just bypassing reality. I spend a lot of time in reality when I'm awake. I don't need to spend that time in reality in the middle of the night, because what happens is I get stuck in those thinking, feeling loops that then just drive me absolutely nutso. So I have been banging on for I don't know how long. Antoinette, do you want to come in here? Have you got something to say, something you want to add, something that I've left out?
Yeah, I'd like to just add it, but that was an astounding perspective, as you always bring, that I have not heard on a podcast or anywhere. And by the way, on Andrew Huberman, I quite like his podcast. I think you do too, because he's very scientifically based, but he brings quite a broad perspective. And him and a guy called Dr. Osborne, who I listened to on sleep, said the kidneys are paramount in sleep. So thank you for that perspective you brought, because they were talking about things like, nutritional deficiencies, which are also important, or histamine, which can be driven up by certain foods. Yeah, what you eat and what time you eat, alcohol. So, yeah, for me, the practical issues were mold. I didn't realize how bad the mold was in my bedroom. Kind of knew there was damp, but so sorting out my mold really helped a lot. Getting block out curtains made a big difference. You're right. It's so interesting what you said about we can wear eye mask or something, but still the light's getting in. What a profound perspective. Thank you. And I've also found now recently I cannot eat, yeah, even between 6 and 8. And if I do, I need to eat something very light. And interestingly, one of these guys said turkey, which we don't eat in South Africa, but is a very good thing to eat before you go to bed because it's very, I can't remember exactly what it physically does, but it converts into something that
Yeah.
helps us sleep. So, um, I think it's very, no, I don't think I know. It's all very unique to each person as well. So we have to always bear that in mind. Even Dr. Osborne said that, and he's like an adamant about certain things like gluten. But he did say for every person it's different. So for me, I can't eat fat, sugar, gluten, even sourdough bread and starchy things. That's kind of what I've come to. If I'm going to eat between 6 and 8, I only occasionally eat chicken. Otherwise, I don't eat animal products, but I can have chicken with a vegetable or something, but something very light. Otherwise, I eat by 4 o'clock, and that's important for me, but it may not be for other people. As Huberman said, some people can drink a cup of coffee at 4 o'clock and be fine, and other people will not sleep the whole night.
I just want to say something about caffeine, Antoinette. Sorry, because that is quite important, right? So, and a lot of people will say don't drink caffeine or don't have too much caffeine or don't have any caffeine after 12. Whether we can eliminate caffeine is also genetically regulated. So, I, for
Thank you.
example,
Yes.
don't have the gene to eliminate caffeine. Caffeine stays in my bloodstream for a very long time. So, if I drink caffeine, I can have a cup of green tea. But even green tea, I notice it. But, so like I can have a cup of green tea and I'm okay. So it's not like no caffeine. But if I have a shot of coffee, if I have like a cappuccino or something like that, right? I start talking faster, if you can imagine that, louder. I'm like completely hyped and I have a complete crash after 45 minutes or so, like nauseous and shaking and feeling awful. But I don't metabolize caffeine. I know I've had my genetics test and I don't have the gene. Some people genetically are amazing caffeine metabolizers. It's the same with alcohol. There's a gene that helps us metabolize alcohol. I don't have that one. It doesn't work. I might, or if I do have, I can't remember. I think mine is deleted actually. I don't think I actually have it. So I don't tolerate alcohol and I don't tolerate caffeine. Other people have both the genes for caffeine and alcohol, which means their tolerance will be better than mine. And this just speaks to, again, the individualism of it. It's really important. And I think that in this complementary health space, a lot of health professions, we make these blanket statements
Yeah.
like no coffee ever. No, I mean, I do think that alcohol is a poison personally, but no alcohol ever. So some people can actually get rid of the toxins. I can't. Never any gluten, whatever. As soon as we start making these absolute statements, we become just as prescriptive as the forms of medicine that we might be railing against. All right. It is
Absolutely.
fundamentalism. All right. So as soon as you start saying things like, this is bad for everyone. I mean, unless we're saying like arsenic, arsenic is bad for everyone. We
And
know,
maybe alcohol.
sure,
I'll
but
talk to
that's also
that
our
just now,
bias.
but
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, sure. So there are some things that are worse for you than others. That when we start saying unequivocally that things like, that
Yeah.
don't ever do this or yeah, then I start getting nervous about that because that polarization, first of all, it makes those of us who are doing those things feel guilty and ashamed of ourselves, which doesn't really help. And so I'm not saying, listen, guys, I'm not saying do whatever you want. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying find out what it is that affects you individually. Get to know
Yeah,
you.
Loretta, absolutely. It all comes down to moment by moment self-awareness, actually, of you and what happens within you. Because I'm one of those people, as you know, I'm always looking for, it's like I want that quick fix still. It's such a natural go-to for me. Just tell me what I can eat and what I can't eat. And I'm like, well, yes, you can do kinesiology and muscle testing and you can listen to Loretta and all of that. But at the end of the day, and you said this once as well, how do you feel after you eat something? thing.
100%.
How do you feel 4 hours later? How do I sleep when I don't eat any sugar, processed sugar, but for me and my body, even sourdough bread seems to turn to something that's not good for me. Maybe I can have it occasionally, but my body can process coffee, which I'm very relieved to hear. Not too much. But Huberman actually said that I'll put a link to his podcast that some people can drink coffee and some people can't. And you can do sourdough bread well. I know that. And I can probably do it occasionally, but I started doing it every day. And since I've cut it out, I've had a much better time sleeping. So, yes, but one of the things that's missing in a lot of what people's putting out is what you've said about the energetics and the spirituality and what to do when we don't sleep. Because also sometimes not sleeping just happens. If we don't sleep for a couple of nights, we do not have to panic because our brains sometimes have to process stress. And as you say, at night is sometimes a time when the mind's working. But if it's persistent over months or years, like mine was, we have to take it very seriously. And I had no idea until I started sleeping what a difference it makes. But what do we do when we don't sleep? That's a hack, if we can use that word, which you and I both don't like, but we always use it. It's been one of the most important things I've self-developed because I have to go to the toilet a lot at night. That's another question I want to ask you when I'm finished. Is if we need to go to the toilet and pee a lot, by the way, I think that's also kidney related. So it's something to be aware of. But
Absolutely.
I do have to usually at least once. But it's about what do you do when you're awake? What do you do with that time? And in Vipassana, which by and large I didn't find very useful, but one thing I found exceptionally useful and I use every time I can't sleep is the guy said, if you can meditate or use whatever word you want, like Loretta said, pray, somehow calm down the thought processes, the emotional process, you can get, they said, and I'm not sure if it's true, but you can get as much rest and revival as if you actually sleep. So I've been experimenting with this actually a lot because I'm like, wow, that's a big thing to tell people. So I wake up during the night for different reasons. It is food and all those other things. But for me, when I wake up between 12 and 2, it usually is. And even if it is food or whatever, what often happens, and this also I think wakes us up, is this anxiety and this over analysis and this analysis paralysis and this fear. Yeah. And you know how quickly you can actually switch that. You can do what works for Loretta, what works for me. And it's got quicker and quicker because the more we practice this, the more our energy, our spirit, our bodies, our souls respond. Is I just identify what I'm feeling and thinking because we can't bypass that, as Loretta says. And then just to know, because this I learned from internal family systems, and we do talk about it, Loretta and I, is that fear that's running you is unconscious. It's not who you really are. It sounds real. Geez, the voice is real. The emotion is real. It can feel like panic at times, especially in the middle of the night for me anyway. And then, of course, your heart starts racing and then you get even more stressed. But I just say, okay, this is my fear, and sometimes I know why it's there, and sometimes I don't. But you know what? I acknowledge you, but you're not actually who I really am. So I see it as a separate part of me, like converse it. And Robert Falconer, who's an IFS psychologist, actually brought this little tool to me, is just see it as something separate, just engage with it. So sometimes I simply say, I see you, I hear you, and I surround you with light and I send you back to the light. Sometimes it works that simple. Sometimes I just say, I acknowledge you, but then I just do an affirmation and go, I put my hand on my heart and I say, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Or this is not who I really am. Who I really am has got this. I mean, they sound so simple, these things, but so often they can just calm this unconscious program, which creating thoughts and emotions, which just I can get completely freaked out. I think we've all know I've got a bit of a mental state that can go overboard. So if you can just somehow, whatever works for you, calm, and maybe sometimes I just have to say to myself as well, you know what, my brain is creating a reaction in my body here, or it's creating a thought process for me that's not even real. Sometimes I realize it's not even true. Like all my trees in my garden are dying now, and some of them are hundreds, if not thousands of years old. They've got a mold that's killing them. And it was so interesting when I recognized that yesterday afternoon. I went to sleep already in almost panic. And then I woke up in the middle of the night in this extreme anxiety and almost panic, because there's a part of me unconsciously that said, how could you not notice that your trees had this terrible mold and they've been slowly dying? Have you been that disconnected? I mean, this is what my mind can do to me. And now I'm going to lose all the trees on my property, and it's going to cost me a fortune to cut them down. And then I'm not going to sell my property. And I'm like, shoo, Antoinette, this is a story. You're telling yourself the whole thing is a story. You don't even know if the trees have to be chopped down or if you were the cause. Maybe it just happens. It's Mother Nature. It's all okay. It's all going to be okay. And I don't have to deal with this now. So that was also quite long-winded. But, if you can't sleep, the most important thing is to be able to deal with it in the right way. I can tell you that, because it's the difference between waking up completely dysregulated, exhausted, and not being able to connect to your day in any way, intellectually, spiritually. And for me, Loretta, so I don't know, you might shoot me for this, and maybe a lot of people like Huberman and all the sleep specialists were, but this is what works for me. And the only reason I'm sharing this now, although it might shock a lot of people who have very definite opinions about this, is because it works for me. And it doesn't work for most other people, maybe. The other thing I can do to really get back to sleep quickly, or I often do an affirmation and just say, in the next 3 to 5 minutes, I will be asleep. That can also be very powerful. But if I turn on a very good podcast, it has to have the right energy vibration, the right kind of information for me. I sleep within 5 or 6 minutes. I can't explain it because we're not meant to have our phones in our room, but it puts me to sleep. It's like a really amazing natural sleeping habit. And I often, not often, but every now and again, quite often watch a comedy or a really good movie. And it's less than an hour before I close my eyes. And sometimes I sleep like a baby after that, and sometimes I don't. So, yeah, I don't know. I have my phone in my room almost every time I can't sleep. So I don't know because I listen to something and I go to sleep.
I think so. I mean, I'm not going to shoot you for that at all because it obviously works for you. I think that again, this is like knowing what works for you or what doesn't. So if you are, so for example, let me just use an example. So if I wake up in the middle, I don't wake up because of overthinking, overanalyzing. That's not my thing. Okay. Which is why I can think about other things and just fall asleep, right? I can recognize, oh, this is a pattern that I have, like, because there's one thing that in particular, I know that my mind, like, it wants to pull me into worrying about work, usually either worrying about a client or worrying about money or worrying about something, okay? But it's always work related. So I don't lie awake in the middle of the night wondering whether my family are going to be okay. That doesn't actually occur to me, all right? So I think that for people who are extremely mentally active and whose brains really easily go down that like loop, a distraction is not a bad thing. And I can totally understand why a podcast would put you to sleep because of the soothing rhythm. It's like, why do we read stories to children to put them to sleep? Well, because you're soothed by the regular rhythmicity of the voice, of the speaking, right? So if you listen to a podcast with someone who has an incredibly strident voice or an accent that you find really difficult, you would struggle to fall asleep. That's so, Antoinette, you were saying it's got to have the right energy, right? you'd struggle to fall asleep. But if you listen to something by someone that you have, so first of all, you're interested, so your mind is engaged. So now your mind is not off on its usual rabbit hole of fears that it takes you down. It's engaged by what you're listening to. And sometimes what you're listening to can calm you down because it's providing you with something that you need. But it's also the regular rhythmicity of the voice. It's like having someone read you a bedtime story. That's not a bad idea, okay? And the movie or the comedy is because it actually, so it does turn off your pineal and you've got less melatonin. But remember, it's not only melatonin that makes you sleep. There's lots of other things that make you sleep. Oh, sorry, tryptophan. Turkey has tryptophan, and tryptophan is a precursor for serotonin. I couldn't remember when you were saying it. I was like, oh, I know this.
That's it, tryptophan.
Yeah, that's why it's
Yes.
turkey. Okay, sorry. That's a
Loretta,
complete.
does chicken have tryptophan? Sorry, I'm so fascinated now on
I'm not
tryptophan.
sure.
No.
I
How
don't
else
eat
do
chicken or
we get
turkey,
it?
so
Because it seems to be
you'd
a
have
big
to.
thing.
It isn't. You get it in other foods.
We'll have to
So
look it up.
yeah, tryptophan is a precursor for serotonin. So
Okay.
okay, that's why turkey works well. And serotonin is the feel-good chemical. So when you watch a comedy or you watch a diverting movie, then you start producing more serotonin. And your nervous system calms down and you're distracted. And you have the regular rhythmicity of the voices. It's like many people reading you a bedtime story. So that's why that actually could work.
Amazing.
You
Thank
know?
you. That's amazing.
Um, yeah, for me, I'm not a get up in the nighter, all right? So I lie in bed, and even if I can't fall asleep, so I'm fortunate. I know how to give myself jinshinjutsu. So if I don't fall asleep with safety energy lock number one, then I go to my little finger. My little finger, your little finger harmonizes your autonomic nervous system, and then I lie there counting 36 breaths while I hold my little finger. Or I give myself a different ginseng, and I soothe myself by saying, even if you don't fall asleep, you'll have given yourself an hour or an hour and a half of ginseng jitsu. It's like going for therapy. So, whether you
Yes, I
meditate
love that.
or pray or affirm or do ginseng jitsu, you are giving yourself this gift in the middle of the night. And now being awake doesn't seem
Beautiful.
like an awful thing.
Oh,
It
you're a
actually is an
genius. I
awesome thing.
freaking love that. Tell me something. Actually, I very often hold my little finger. Thank you. That's something you brought to me in Jitsu. But why is it helpful? Is that because that's the seat? Is that where the anxiety thing is
Uh,
happening? Or
so a number of levels. So the heart, this little finger is where the heart, remember the Shen? The heart and the small intestine are represented by the little finger. So the small intestine is for the over-analyzing, and the heart helps you to connect to your spirit. So when you hold your little finger energetically, you're harmonizing those two functions, and it has an effect on your autonomic nervous system. And in Jinshin Jitsu, the attitude or the sort of, I'm going to call it the negative emotion. It's not really the negative emotion. They call them, in fact, how nice is this? In Jinshin Jitsu, they don't talk about them as being emotions, negative or positive. They just talk about them as being attitudes. They say that when we have an emotion repeatedly, it develops into an attitude. So people have an attitude of anger, or they have an attitude of sadness. And the little finger is the pretending and the trying to. So all this toxic positivity where I've pretended that I'm strong when I'm weak, where I've been positive when I'm actually feeling awful, when I'm not actually being true about what's actually going, when I'm not facing my current reality, and all the competition and the comparing and competing. I'm not as good as this person. I'm not as rich as this person. I'm not as intelligent as this person. I'm not as gorgeous as this person. Okay, that is harmonized when we hold the little finger, which is why that is so
yes.
powerful.
That's amazing. And we also compete, the different parts of ourselves compete as well. That's me.
100%.
I don't
Yes.
often think about how I compete with others, but there's these parts of myself that like compete with each other. But I think we'll do a whole episode on this because it's very interesting if we can accept all those parts of ourselves.
Yeah. And in actual fact, the little finger is associated with the imperative language of I should, I must. When you're lying there and you're going, oh my God, I must, I have to go to sleep. So I should, I must, I ought, I need. When you use that language, that is those competing parts of yourself, Antoinette. So, your spiritual guru is telling your body that it is not in alignment right now. Okay. So that's okay. That is
You're amazing.
Little finger. So that's why the
That's
little finger is really
amazing.
powerful. And if you hold the little finger, so it's sometimes in the middle of the night you're lying there and you're like, well, this is not working. I've sometimes fallen asleep like 2 seconds after going, oh my God, this is not working. Okay.
Me
And
too.
if you're awake, even if you're watching a movie, hold your little finger. Because what's the worst that can happen? You're giving yourself a Jinshin treatment. Another useful one is if you wake up, and I've done this, if you wake up and you're incredibly fearful, you're really fearful about something, like something you're dreading, right? And you've done the affirmation, you've sent it to the light, you've done all, and it's not working. Your index finger, this is the finger that governs and controls your kidney. So
Oh,
this
thank
helps to
you.
harmonize your fear in the night. So what I do if I'm not falling asleep, often, sometimes, depends, I just intuitively go. I do 36 breaths on my index, 36 breaths on my little. And if I'm still awake, I do the other hand, 36 on this one and 36 on this one. Honestly, it takes about 3 minutes to do 36 breaths. So by focusing on the counting the cycles of breathing, I stop my mind from going all over the shop. And by holding those fingers, what I'm actually saying to myself is, Loretta, don't worry. Just what you said, Antoinette, I've got this. This is not who I really am. This is an emotion that I'm currently experiencing based on a fear that might not even materialize. But I am soothing myself energetically by doing this exercise. And remember, the placebo effect accounts for 30% of all changes we make when we take a medication or we have a treatment. So what's the worst that can happen? If this is all a lot of bump that I've just told you, if it's all the biggest lot of codswallop, the truth is you've got 30% chance of it working, because that's what the placebo effect does.
That is so true. And listen, Dr. Lisa Rankin and people like that have proven that the placebo effect really works, but that's for another
100%.
episode.
No, no, no.
Wow.
100%.
Probably the most important takeaway from this episode, reflecting back on it, is what to do when you can't sleep, because it can create a lot of anxiety because people know how they're going to feel the next day. And then people tend to reach for working or whatever they do, eating. I don't know. Thank goodness that's one time of the day I don't eat in the middle of the
I
night.
have
The
a lot
rest
of
of the
eating issues, but not the middle of the
yeah,
night.
me too. So thank you, Loretta. Do you want to throw anything else in?
No, I don't think so. I just wanted to answer your question about the urinating.
Oh,
The
yes, please.
urinating frequently at night can be that. So just back to the Chinese medicine model, the kidney controls the hormones, the health of the hormones in general. And it also regulates how well you filter toxins. So if you've got a disharmony in your kidney organ function energy or in your bladder organ function energy, because they're connected, you can have more frequent urination at night. It can also be a lack of electrolytes. So if you have to get up at night to pee,
Yes, okay.
then taking an electrolyte solution during the course of the day, it doesn't have to be at night, it doesn't have to be just before you go to bed, can also help to regulate that. And most importantly, and this is something I noticed, I started having to get up twice, sometimes 3 times at night. And it was hormone related. As soon as I started using I needed to use a hops cream for something else. And hops is a natural phytoestrogen. As soon as I started using the hops cream, I noticed I weed less at night. So I'm not saying hops cream for everyone, please. I'm not saying we all need hops cream. I'm just showing that there's a correlation between what happens to us hormonally and what happens to us in terms of how frequently we urinate or don't urinate. So
Thank you.
because your kidney controls your urination as well as your hormones.
In
So
fact, electrolytes came up, yeah, in the podcast. These very good people, but who take it more from that kind of angle. So, can you recommend a natural electrolyte for us? Because
for those of you in South Africa, I mean, I'm not affiliated to this company in any way, but the ones that I use are called salt water, SALT. I think it's not, the water isn't written, salt, WTR, salt water. The reason why I use that one is because it doesn't have any glucose in it. Because a lot of the rehydrate, those solutions, they have glucose in them because they're for people who really need to get their blood sugar up as well, right? Athletes and those kind of things. So the salt water ones they don't have any glucose in them. So and they're clean. They don't have any They don't have any. They don't have anything weird and wonderful chemicals in them. So those are the ones that I use in South Africa, and I buy mine online from a company called Wazoogles. They make protein powders, Wazoogles, and so I'll just buy them from them. But you can buy them in stores as well. I'm sure that they supply in stores, so you can look it up. And they
And
come in very
hydration is another thing that comes up when you go into real research about this. And people, I do usually drink quite a bit of water, but I had no idea until now that the quality of my water here is not okay, even though I'm filtering it. But some people don't hydrate with water, and then they drink a lot of coffee and tea and
So
yeah,
yeah,
so
they take those because caffeine is a urinary stimulant. So
and
if you can
tea and
metabolize,
tea.
yeah. So yeah, if you can metabolize caffeine well, so it's not the caffeine that's keeping you awake, but you're urinating 3 times a night. It could be that. Also, even if you don't drink agents that help to dehydrate you, and you drink a lot of water, you drink a fair amount of water, but you urinate really frequently, which means you don't retain the water well. That's very often an indicator of an electrolyte imbalance. So
Oh,
I always
thank
used to
you.
think that you only need electrolytes when you've been doing like heavy exercise and sweating. I've come to realize that I don't take electrolytes every single day, but I take them every day that I exercise. And I always take them when I fast, because that's another thing. If you do intermittent fasting, or you have, you do prolonged fasts, like 18 to 24 hours, you do start urinating a lot because you go into ketosis. And then you're not just weeing out liquid, you're weeing out minerals, right? And again,
Oh,
your
thank
kidney
you.
regulates whether you retain minerals or not. So when you urinate too frequently, that can be a sign of kidney organ function, energy stress. Always comes back to that. And then if that's the case, you're going to need electrolytes more. So
Thank you.
premenopausally, I didn't bother with electrolytes. Now that I'm in menopause, I urinate more frequently. I do fast more frequently. I take the electrolytes more frequently.
Yeah,
And
they made a big difference in my life, but I'm going to get the natural ones. And I'm going to actually just throw in, I was a person who drank alcohol for a very, very long time, but I gave up 6.5 months ago. And the information that came my way on a sobriety group I joined is that no amount of alcohol is safe. Hey, if I mean I'm so I'm not preaching here because I convinced myself because homeopaths and lots of people told me 2 glasses of red wine is good for you. People drink a
not
little
this
bit of
one.
alcohol. Hey, not you. No,
Not
no, no,
this one.
not you, not you. You've always said no to alcohol, actually. But there's proper research now. There's a guy in Canada who he spends all day and he's being paid to research the effect of alcohol on the human body. And one of the things that's coming over and over again in proper research on alcohol in the brain is you cannot have any amount of alcohol actually that's safe. Although the safe limit, I think, is 1.5 bottles of wine a week. So actually quite a lot, eh?
Mm.
But this research is now up. This is one of the reasons I stopped because I'd done a lot of sobriety books and stuff, but I'd never heard this real neurological, physical, alcohol-related research that no amount of alcohol is actually safe and it's going to disrupt your sleep. It's like taking an antihistamine to sleep or even melatonin, one of the guys says, you feel like you're sleeping because you're tired and you go to sleep, but you don't have a good quality of sleep. So people will say, I drink alcohol and I sleep well, but are you sleeping well? So, yeah, I'll put the links in for Huberman's thing about sleep and Dr. Osborne's. And yeah, if you want to know anything about alcohol, I did an episode with Janet, who started Tribe Sober. I'm not promoting you never drinking again, but I'm just saying be aware that there might be information out there that you don't actually know till you know it.
100%.
Okay, Loretta. So please, can we ask you, please subscribe to our channel. We're going to try and grow the channel now so that we can connect it to offering community support and pop-up workshops and stuff. So please help us by pressing subscribe. I don't subscribe because I just listen, but I realize now how important it is for people. So subscribe on YouTube, write us a review on Apple, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts or even if you're on Spotify. Follow us and share this if you found it valuable. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Loretta, and thank you everyone for listening.
Bye.